Okay, so tonight we're going to do something a little bit different. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be looking at what makes a great speech opening. Basically, the first few moments of your speech are critical. If you don't capture the audience's attention up front, good luck getting it later. This is all part of the new Pathways educational requirements, the Better Speaker series. I know most of you know that there's been some changes to Pathways recently, and in addition to our regular assigned curriculum, we now have to take on some additional meeting roles in order to move forward with our paths. But also, what many of you might not know, because I haven't seen too many of these yet, is when you get to levels 3, 4, and 5, you have to start taking these educational pathways. And tonight's comes from the Better Speaker series, which is about 7 or 8 electives to choose from. And you have to choose one elective on how to, be a better speaker. There's all types of electives there: how to make a better close, how to better structure a speech, a better topic, including tonight's topic, how to open a speech, which is the most important. Because no matter how much you want to wind up the close and close with emphasis, if the only one still paying attention is your evaluator, then I'd say you have some work still ahead of you. And although good structure is important, as well as the topic, you really got to get the attention up front. I gave you all some handouts tonight. These came directly from the project itself. I did twist it around a little bit. Don't worry if it's a little blurry in ink. I intended it to be that way, actually. It's just a prop, something I'm going to go over in a little bit more detail later on. What we're also going to do as we work through these is we're going to work through a real speech example that I gave a while back, which I think is a good example. I used not just one, but several of these key speech topics to bring the audience in and capture their intention. Let's take a look at a few of these as we go through here. And I'm not going to go into these in too much detail because I know a lot of you are already using many of these, like ask the audience a question, start with a little bit of humor, arouse some curiosity, or make a startling statement. But in my opinion, it isn't so much about getting the audience's attention, but as it is about keeping the audience's attention. And just because you state with a startling statement doesn't necessarily mean you're going to capture the audience's attention and they're going to continue to listen to you. Let's take a look at this example here. Make a startling statement. It's number V3 on the list, by the way. And I can't even read this myself. I should wear my glasses. Startle your listeners with an intriguing statement that will compel them to listen further. So, for example, that they give. Example, smoking kills. More people have died from cigarette smoke than in World War II and Vietnam. Startling statistic. That's a lot of people that died in both those wars. But even if I were a 2-pack-a-day smoker, that wouldn't get me to stop smoking. Why? Because they're stating something that's already obvious. Everyone knows that smoking is bad for you. And secondly, their intended audience, I would assume, smokers really don't care too much about their health anyway. And a statement like that isn't going to want to get me to lean in and listen to you more, but lean back and tune you out. You see, you have to get the audience on your side, and that takes some time. Even if you have the right answers, it takes some time to pitch your case. But what if you don't have time? What if you have to get their attention quicker? And there's one thing on this list that you can do, and that's curiosity. With curiosity, I can capture your attention instantly before I even say a word. So at this time, let's work through a real speech example I gave a while back where I relied heavily on curiosity in a series of successive statements where I used not just one, but 5 of these key speech components to gradually bring my audience in. And I'm not going to focus on the delivery, which is a whole other level itself, but more on the structure and the strategy that went into that open. So the speech, some of you might have been here for, I gave a speech about my sacred Himalayan journal that I brought with me to Nepal, and I went on this deep spiritual journey, and I climbed the mountain, and I came back a changed person. And although that was probably a pretty decent topic, it wasn't going to resonate with everyone. Not everyone here is a mountain climber, and personally, you're all on your own spiritual journey, so why should you have any interest in mine? So I knew I had some work cut out for me. I knew it was relatable, I just had to get you into it to want to listen. And I knew I had to get attention quickly. So the first thing that I did was I used a prop. What's a prop? It's something you bring in and you hold in your hand. Doesn't matter what it is, it's going to attract attention. It's human nature. Anytime you have something in your hand, like this clipboard, which I should put down, by the way, it's like if I had a gun in my hand. All eyes would be on that gun. It doesn't matter if it's a gun or a clipboard. Were you not curious when I walked up there with that clipboard and you got handouts, which are the icing on the cake. You were thinking, what's with that clipboard? Am I back in the office or stuck in school or something? No, I'm in Toastmasters, but there's Mike. How come he's not giving a speech? He's teaching us something tonight. Us. So you were thinking. In that speech, I brought the journal in. I could have chose to leave the journal home, but I brought the journal in, and I said, this is my sacred Himalayan journal that I brought with me to Nepal. It was old, it was worn out, and you could tell it was something that was authentic. That instantly added another layer of depth to that opening. I could have very easily just left the journal home and came in and told you about some magical journal that I brought with me to Nepal that I cooked up with ChatGPT the weekend before and was sitting on my shelf. But it added authenticity to it, and it let you know that the speech was important and something that you might want to listen to. So that's the first thing on that list, which I actually wrote in there because it wasn't on their list, which is use a prop. Well, eventually I started having to say something, and the best way to sometimes say something is with a little bit of humor. Why use humor? Because you start off gentle, you start off light. It's much easier than starting off with a statistic or something the audience has to think too hard about, not right in the beginning. So I told a quick little story, a little anecdote about the journal. I said, originally it was supposed to be this nice, beautiful, leather-bound journal that my girlfriend at the time had gotten me, but she always had a temper, and then she chucked it in the dumpster right before my plane left, and I had to get that piece of junk to carry around as my sacred journal. So it's just something light that I did to the audience to just kind of start off with a little bit of a light mood. That was actually 2 and 3. That was a story in itself. You always sometimes want to use a story because it brings in a personal connection. What else is on that list? And I know I've seen this one before. Ask a question, a rhetorical question. I asked the question, but with a little bit of a twist. I asked my journal the question, which was a real question I actually did in real time. I kept asking it that one question. Why? Why Nepal? Why did I come here? And that's kind of where I started to build into the deep spiritual journey with the question with an interesting spin. That was 4. The 5th one, which I really laid on the curiosity, I said something along the lines of, and I was telling the reason why the journal was sacred, and I said, and the reason why it's so sacred is because I've never even shared it with anyone before, so aren't you all so lucky here tonight? And what I was trying to get with that was instill in everyone's mind that, the journal, it's like a diary, it's something that's very private. Why hasn't he never shared it with anyone before? What kind of secrets does he have in there? And now tonight he's going to share it with me, and I might want to listen and get the inside scoop because he's probably not going to want to share it again. That's where I was going with that strategy and just thinking through that. Then again, the execution was a whole other part. Didn't land it the way that I wanted to. But that's where it was a layered system, if you notice. It wasn't just one technique, and it spanned at about 45 seconds. So when you think of your openings, think of them in terms of a series of statements as opposed to just one quick line that you do to get attention, because you have to keep attention and you have to set your audience up for that. Any questions?